Welcome to Queer Gals Watch the West Wing.
Hi, Leigh.
Hello, Fiona. How are we?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, where we are on episode 3 of season 1.
Episode 3.
I know. Progress has been thick and fast, I think.
We're really hitting our stride now, both in the Bartlett presidency and in this podcast.
100%.
If you are just joining us now, we are rewatching The West Wing in an attempt to answer everyone's stupid questions about how on earth the American political system works, as we know that people might be slightly anxious as to the big event coming in November, in which Donald Trump appears to be once again storming towards the Republican nomination for President of the United States.
It's a terrifying time, and I, as someone who knows very little about American politics, do need the comfort of TV to help kind of protect me in both learning and preparing for potentially another terrible 4 years.
Oh, dear God. Yeah, absolutely. So if you're just joining us now, do go back and listen to episode 1 and episode 2, because we started with a lovely recap of the pilot and the second episode, and now we're going to head into episode 3.
Yes. So this week's episode is called A Proportional Response. And once we've done our little recap, Leigh is going to take us into a little study section where she's going to pull apart something new for me to learn about that I know literally nothing about. So Leigh, what are we going to be focusing on this week?
We're going to have a kind of double hitter today, or kind of like a main one and a bonus, because obviously we spend quite a lot of time in this episode with the Joint Chiefs. So we're going to unpack what the Joint Chiefs are, and also what their experience was around the time of Jan 6th. And we also spend quite a lot of time in the Situation Room in this episode. So I thought it would be fun to take a little deep dive into the history of the Situation Room.
Or as the West Wingers call it, the sit room.
The sit room. It took me 2 watches through to be like, oh, they're just using like cool little like in the know slang for everything. And then I was like, oh, the Secretary of State. That's what you're talking about. You're just referring to a person as state, but you're talking about the Secretary of State. Fine.
Thanks for letting us catch up, Aaron Sorkin.
See you in the sit room in 20.
Okay, well, let's dive in. So episode 3, A Proportional Response. I think last week I just got very excited and sort of just rattled through everything and anything I could remember from the episode. So I'm going to try and be a little bit more specific today, and not be so scared to say, I don't understand.
Because that's what this podcast is for. It's to answer people's stupid questions so they don't have to ask their like patronizing, mansplaining, political nerd straight man friend. They can just come and listen to our podcast in a safe space of non-judgment.
Exactly. I do think that we should start with just a PSA that for the last 2 episodes, we have been confidently calling Sam's executive assistant Bonnie, and her name is, in fact, Kathy.
Yeah, so I think the full round of EAs that we have at this point, obviously the EAs are, in fact, the stars of the show. I think we have Bonnie, Kathy, Sheila, obviously Mrs. Landingham, the president's
Sorry,
EA.
Dolores, please. Dolores Landingham.
Dolores Landingham, star of the West Wing. Am I missing anyone? Oh, and obviously Donatella.
Yeah, lest we forget. The icon, the legend.
Amazing.
Actually, on the subject of names, did you know that President Bartlett's full name is Josiah Edward Bartlett?
It's giving biblical, it's giving like British royal, which gives me the impression of like old American money.
100%. Like, it's so insane, but also so believable. But he likes to go by Jed Bartlett, which is what he says to Charlie later in the episode. Hi, I'm Jed.
Jed is a very kind of cool presidential name.
You need to be like a Bill, or like a Jed, or like something like short and like snappy that makes you just
short
like,
and quippy.
One of the guys, just one of the guys, just having a beer.
Buddy, old pal.
Okay, let's circle back to the EAs. So we do start the episode with Donna quite rightly asking Josh for a raise.
Correct.
And my conclusion was that Donna does indeed deserve a raise.
This woman is going so above and beyond in her job description. She is literally listening out for gossip relevant to Josh's job in the women's bathrooms where he is denied access.
Yeah. And I think that Josh currently is underestimating the level of information that is given and received within bathrooms.
This is the power I always felt of being like the receptionist, is everyone thinks that you don't have a brain and then will confidently talk about everything and anything directly in front of the reception desk. And you'll be like, I know the most about this company of anyone here.
Yeah, 100%. Like they think that you don't exist. And that is a very powerful position to be in.
So powerful.
Also, I imagine if we're in 1998 that Donna is probably not on a great wage. And so therefore 100% she should be getting a raise. But I dread to think.
Yeah.
What she's having to survive on in DC, like we've said before, she's definitely living in like some shared accommodation with a couple of other gal pals.
I want like the Sex and the City and West Wing merger show that is Donatella's girly house share.
Yes. Okay. So I feel like we should probably set aside some time at some point to brainstorm this concept because I feel incredibly passionate about it.
Just a collection of like 4 women who really love politics, but they've all ended up as like secretaries and EAs, and they're just like, why can I not get a job that's not support staff?
Yeah, and like someone's fallen in love with their boss. Donna
has fallen in love with her boss.
Man, the sexual tension is so palpable. But yeah, so the thing that Donna is kind of toying with Josh about is the fact that CJ is looking for him. Cue CJ just being in Josh's office, reading the newspaper with her like legs up on the desk, crossed at the ankle. And I think this image of Alison Janney is possibly one of the most incredible I've ever seen. Like,
I want a poster of it on my bedroom wall.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And if I had been watching if I had been watching this show as a teen, I think I would have had quite a lot of like CJ based posters. And I also think I would have just started wearing like skirt suits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just alongside my Delta Goodrum poster. Just CJ and Delta Goodrum.
What a range. What a spectrum of women.
Just completely oblivious as to why I like them so much. Anyway, so we have this incredible showdown between Josh and CJ, which is all about the fact that Sam has been seeing Laurie, his call girlfriend, and Josh knows about it, Toby knows about it, but no one has told CJ, possibly the most important person to know about this scenario.
As the press secretary, she kind of manages the public facing of the West Wing. So it's very much her business.
Which is why, again, it's very iconic that the first thing that she says to him is, "Wow, are you stupid?"
I love it. I love it so much.
To which Josh replies with, "You're overreacting?"
Yeah, this is crazy. This is like the most infuriating thing that can be said to a woman in the workplace, as far as I'm concerned. Imagine, if you will, please, me in a green room post-gig and a male comic being upset about how something had gone and me saying, "You're overreacting." I would be blacklisted from the entire comedy circuit so quickly. There's no way a woman could say that to a man in the workplace.
And it's unbelievable. And so when Josh says, "I'm a professional, I'm not a little boy," I would disagree with that.
The moment
frankly.
you're having to say out loud, "I'm not a little boy," you've lost the argument as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think that's a great standpoint to have. But what this kind of showdown does conclude with is just both of them kind of like losing their shit at each other for just a moment.
I just love that they have up their sleeves, like, what is the thing that I could say to this person that would annoy them the most? He calls her a paranoid Berkeley shiksa feminista.
Oh, it's such a sick burn. And then CJ comes back with, "You elitist, Harvard fascist, missed the dean's list twice, 2 semesters in a row, Yankee jackass."
I love it so much. And I love that she knows that the thing that still bothers him is he didn't make the dean's list.
So is that like the kind of like list at like Ivy League schools where they have like the kind of top students of the year?
Yeah, so you know how obviously we both got firsts
Stop it. Yeah, we did.
in our theatre degree, confidently. But it's very much like that. It's like the people who got like the top marks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know what I love is that CJ has battled Josh's pettiness with pettiness. Like she's like, oh, I can, if you can dish it out, then you've got to take it.
Exactly. There's no professional respect lost. It's just like, okay, we've both lost our cool and now we're moving on. Fine.
Yeah, it's like, see you later.
Literally.
And I kind of rate that. I feel like potentially British people, and I don't know, I can't speak for the Irish, but I feel like we would benefit from just being like, should we have 5 minutes so we just say how we feel and then just move on?
Yeah, no, 100%. And what I love about Alison Janney's performance, I think it's like such a nuanced performance of like a woman working in a man's world, where she just like, you see because there's a couple of times through this episode where you see a man be really patronizing to her or use her femininity against her as a reason why she doesn't deserve to have information or she's not included in a conversation. And every time I feel like you see it hit her, and I think you see her emotional response behind the eyes, and then you also see that like she's a professional and she's not going to let the other person see it, but we as the audience see her, like we do see her vulnerability.
Yeah, it's an absolutely masterful performance because, and I would love to see some like excerpts of the script, because you do see those kind of like moments of systemic misogyny landing with Alison Janney, and you're like, I wonder if that's written in or if that's a choice that she's made in her performance. Being, you know, it's the 90s and I'm playing the female lead basically in this very male-dominated drama series. Like, yes, CJ and Alison Janney are not necessarily coming from the same life experience, but in terms of being like women in a man's world at that time, yeah, very much so.
And what I also love is it's never Leo and it's never Toby. So it's never the two head honchos that treat her this way. It's the two young, kind of hot, like men in their 30s. They're the ones that come and disrespect her.
Yeah.
And you see that hurt her on a personal level. And then on a professional level, she's like, fuck this, I'm not engaging.
Yeah. And I think almost the kind of the level of respect that people like Leo give her, you can tell that that's one, just because he genuinely values her, but also that he's like, I know that you don't get this moment of support from other people that work with you, so I'm going to make a point that I'm going to say it.
It's almost like Josh and Sam are like very, very capable, but they don't have the experience yet to get into their like 40s where they've kind of moved beyond their own egos.
Yeah, it's the classic scenario of someone being like, oh yeah, but she knows it's all jokes. And you're like, it doesn't matter if she knows that. It's important for you to voice it. Anyway, I think the conclusion we've come to is that Alison Janney is a genius and CJ has our hearts forever.
Correct.
Speaking of pettiness, we should move on to President Bartlett, because he is just absolutely lost it in this episode.
Yeah.
Like stone cold, just like he's like your kind of gal pal that's just gone through a really toxic breakup and is just making really rogue choices left, right and center and just like burning bridges.
It's very much the energy of you when you came home from an incident that will not be named with a person who will not be named, and you storm through our flat with a fag and your lighter, ready to light the cigarette, just like shaking with fury.
Just like throwing up the window, leaning out.
Throwing up the window, already mid-sentence lighting the cigarette. And they're just commencing a tirade, which is one of my all-time moments from you. And Bartlett is very much in that energy.
I think that's why I feel so triggered by it. So I see so much of myself in him. But he's certainly got his grumpy pants on, big time. Obviously, some of that is very warranted. There has been like a genuine terror threat upon the US, and also he has lost a personal friend. But equally, he's making this everyone else's problem. He's also lost his glasses and is just being... You know, when you're just like, I really want Mrs. Landingham to turn around and be like, Mr. President, that is entirely like your problem.
That is a you issue.
Yeah. So we're following Bartlett and like getting into the real meat of the episode in terms of like how we're going to respond to the attack on the plane, which Morris was on in the last episode. But what we do find out is that Bartlett is a Democrat.
I wasn't sure that we were going to get that information.
I thought we might go through like the whole thing without ever knowing who he was, because I was like, I feel like that's quite a political statement as like a showmaker for Sorkin to be like, yeah, this is about a Democrat.
Yeah, and I guess we're both coming from like the thick of it where we never know what party they're in. Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. But I wonder if I'll get to it later on. I've got thoughts.
I think maybe it is to do with like the fact that Bill Clinton was in office at this time, and so the Democratic Party was the kind of like young and sexy party at the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also because we are at this point pre 9/11, the whole concept of like how in like hypothetically a US government were to engage with kind of like military action, especially as a democratic government, I think is very interesting. I love that we're in this episode, we start seeing like the gang really come together. And by the gang, I mean the executive branch.
Yeah.
See, using my new words. So like everyone's kind of like, we're like around desks and someone's like, I'll start working on that speech and then scurrying off. And I find those sorts of scenes really satisfying. But alongside that satisfaction, we also just continually have Sam Seaborn just being an idiot.
Correct.
He finally, even though he's got his tail massively between his legs and realizes that he has to go and talk to CJ, he goes into CJ's office and we have just another fantastic moment of just like Alison Janney behind her desk, two female members of staff just like making copious notes.
And looking at her with like such respect and admiration, just like hanging on her every word. I want CJ to be my boss.
Yes. Yeah, no, 100%.
And I'm glad that we're finally getting an indication that CJ also has her own staff. Because of course she would.
And she's not just sort of like waltzing around giving press conferences. Like, there's a huge amount of prep that's going into all of her work. Love that. I also love that as Sam enters, she just like takes off her glasses, looks at him, and without breaking eye contact with Sam, just says, "We're done." And the two members of her staff just like leave.
Yeah. Class dismissed.
It's hot.
Yeah.
It's really hot.
Dare I say it's giving Power Dyke energy.
I've just written in my notes, "Give me strength, Ms. Janney."
Yeah.
And I stand by that comment.
Yeah.
And oh boy, is the following scene just fantastic. And a fantastic kind of give me strength, Ms. Janney moment. Because Sam is just being a little shit.
Yes, and in this scene, I did note that he does remind me of my girlfriend's cat in this scene. In that my girlfriend's cat is going through some behavioural issues at the moment. I believe he's grieving the other cat who sadly passed away in the last couple of months. And so he's just like really acting out and just like biting people for no reason. And I feel like that's very much the energy of Sam right now. It's like, I'm upset.
He's just decided that this is the hill he's going to die on. And I'm just not sure if he should have done that. Also, I feel confident that Laurie would be like, no, Sam, I really don't need you to do this.
Yeah.
In the words of CJ, she says, "Don't get cute with me." And I would like to second that. I don't need Sam to get cute with me.
He essentially mansplains feminism and misogyny to his only female peer.
Yeah, I really hate it. And I also really hate the kind of like framing of his relationship with Laurie, because I was so on board when he was like, there shouldn't be anything wrong with me being friends with someone who is working as an escort. And then he's like, oh, I'm hoping that I can like get her out of it. And like, I'm going to be the one to like support her into making better choices. And I really hated that. I was like, you don't know her that well.
Also, she doesn't need saving. She didn't ask to be saved. Thank you very much.
And she has been incredibly clear with him in the previous episode that she's like, no, I like what I do.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
I don't
putting
need...
me through law school. I make more money than you.
Yeah. Frankly, I think Sam needs to just like take a second. Also, he then says that CJ has neither strength, guts, or courage.
Also, he has just kind of like mansplained her own job to her by being like, I don't care about what it looks like. I care about what it is. And like, I'm on this moral crusade to save this fallen woman. And Alice and Johnny, quite rightly, CJ is like, well, it's my job how things look. And unfortunately, it's like you can't, as a member of the White House team in the America of 1999, have a relationship with a sex worker. Like, it's just
not going to happen.
And you can't put the morality of that on CJ. CJ didn't decide that was how things were. CJ is just telling him the reality of how the world works, which she understands much more clearly as a woman than he does.
Yeah, and then Sam just kind of like takes this issue and just steamrolls it into everyone else's lives throughout the rest of this episode, which I will get to because I think he's just being incredibly rude. Okay, enough about Sam. He's making me angry. I would like to meet the commanders-in-chief. The scene where we first meet the commanders-in-chief in what I'm assuming is the sit room.
So the president is the commander-in-chief.
Oh, sorry.
And we are meeting the joint chiefs.
Correct. Sorry. Yes. Because he is in charge and they technically defer to him.
Yeah. So basically the president of the United States is the commander of the US Armed Forces. It all basically comes down to his decision making. But the joint chiefs who he is meeting with, which we'll get into a bit later, are the heads of each of the branches of the military that have been like elected basically as their representatives to the president. And it's chaired by the chairman of the joint chiefs, Fitzwallace.
I love him.
Love Fitzwallace.
I've got many thoughts about him to come up later. This scene where we meet the Joint Chiefs is stunning and like beautifully written.
And they are advising him as to how he could potentially respond to the airplane that was shot down in last episode.
And they've come incredibly prepared. They've got like 3 options for him, and they begin to explain their incredibly prepared work. And he's just like, no, I'm just like not feeling it. I actually kind of just like am really pissed off. Because they're saying, oh, we need to plan a proportional response.
Yeah.
And Bartlett's like, what is the virtue of a proportional response?
Not starting a war. That's
Thank you.
the virtue of a proportional response. Yeah, his speech did not age well in the context of a post-Iraq war world.
No, and I think it's such an interesting speech because what he's saying is like, if we just keep doing the same level of violence to each other, there is no end to the violence. And you're like, yes, but what's the alternative to that?
Killing civilians. That's the alternative to that. Is civilians dying.
Starting a war. So it's a very interesting like moral point that he's raising, but it is completely negated by the fact that he's just being a little bitch about it.
Yeah, and I would really love him to stop using biblical language to talk about airstrikes.
It's so worthy, and I really don't like it. It's very American to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, he kind of turns around to this room full of incredibly seasoned military staff and is like, come up with a better idea because I just don't like your ideas.
Yeah.
Which is, you're like, okay, he's having a bad day, but how pissed off would you be if you were leaving that meeting being like, he didn't even look through my proposal?
I mean, I imagine the real Joint Chiefs who had to go into a lot of meetings with Donald Trump probably know exactly how that feels. I don't know that he ever read any of their briefings.
So I saw this thing on Twitter. Oh, God. Well, we have a new character alert this episode, Leigh.
Yeah.
He's my new fave, I think. So we meet Charlie. And Charlie is here for a job interview. He's like a young American guy who has what I can only conclude is the worst interview ever. First of all, it's quite clear that Josh, who is interviewing him, is like late.
Yeah.
And also just like in the process of ordering his lunch with Donna, which also let's just bullet point, not her job to get him lunch. It's a grey area. Yeah. It's like, why is she proofreading his speeches and also getting him bottled water?
I mean, Also, the way that he orders his lunch is so camp, being like, I want a soup and I want a salad and a soup, and if there were a sandwich to be found, expense be damned. And it's like, we didn't need like poetic fireworks in the ordering of your lunch.
Just tell the woman what you want. So Josh arrives late, and poor Charlie is like, he has prepared, he has arrived to interview for a messenger job. He has had that interview with a different member of staff.
In a lovely ironed suit and tie.
Yes, he's done very well. Josh then just like starts like flipping through paperwork and asks what I think is an incredibly personal question, where he's just like, why aren't you in college? You're like, you're really smart, your grades are better than mine, why aren't you in college? Which I think in America, where to my knowledge, going to university is really expensive.
Yeah.
Even if you go to community college. Like, that's an incredibly personal question, because it's kind of a moment of like Josh being very unaware of his personal privilege.
Yeah, but I do also kind of get that, like, if someone's going to be the personal aide to the president, they do kind of need to get down to the nitty gritty quite quickly of their whole backstory as a person.
Yeah.
And like what's driving them and what obstacles are in their way. And, you know, all of those kind of things. I think it does make sense that you would have to be like, okay. But obviously, Charlie has not actually, at this point, consented to interviewing for this job.
Exactly.
He just wants a job as a messenger.
Exactly. So he has done his interview as a messenger, and the person interviewing him has sort of like recommended him to go for the role of the president's aide.
President's personal aide, yeah.
President's personal aide. No one's really told Charlie this. So he's just quite stressed and just like in the West Wing, just like unaware as to why he's been waiting in like the Roosevelt room for so long. And this is, I think the reason why I love him so much immediately is because this is my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Like doing loads of preparation for one thing and then another entirely other thing being thrown on you. I understand why he's so bad at answering Josh's questions, because like if he knew he was going up for this job, he would have prepared for it.
Also, I think it's a really interesting choice that he doesn't kind of have any of the like swagger that Sam and Josh have. He refers to Josh as sir, and Josh is like, don't call me sir, like we're kind of all equals here, is essentially what Josh says. And he then continues and will not stop calling him sir throughout the whole interview. And so I think there is that kind of, he's going to be a different kind of masculine energy that's going to be entering the show.
Which I really like. And also it kind of really tees him up to be the sort of layman character who's not entered this world because he has aspirations of being a politician or working alongside politicians, but just because, you know, he wants an opportunity to do something that's like meaningful and kind of going to give him a bit of drive. So I feel like he's kind of going to be our access point, our as viewers access point into kind of some of the world of the West Wing.
And kind of in a way like a foil for Donna in that sense, in that I feel like all of the support staff we've seen have all been women in these kind of administrative roles. And I think it's really nice that we're now having a male character that's in a similarly kind of like support role. And what that looks like, I think, is really nice.
Yeah. And I was reading online that Charlie's role was actually kind of added into the script as kind of response from the showrunners to criticism that there weren't enough characters of color. And I think, you know, we do meet two other we do two black characters in this episode, because one of our Joint Chiefs,
the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, is black, Admiral Fitzwallace.
Sorry, Admiral Fitzwallace. And he's just, you know, a kind of, again, coming in like a high status character. So what I think is like a genius move is to kind of see these two characters kind of coming from two ends of the spectrum within kind of White House staffing.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. Like, I read the introduction, Aaron Sorkin's introduction to the script collection, and he kind of said like, oh, we just hired the best actors for the job, and then there was just one problem, that they were all white. And I'm kind of like, I don't know if that is exactly what happened. I think maybe you are wanting to say that you were more aware of it as an issue than you were prior to the NAACP obviously protesting against it. I have a feeling that maybe it was a kind of unconscious bias or like a little bit of a short-sightedness on the part of the showmakers. And then they obviously responded to that criticism by giving us the character of Charlie, who has stolen my heart immediately.
Yeah, he's also a gorgeous, gorgeous man, which does help. I am a big fan of people being like, that wasn't my best work. You know what? I'm going to do better from now on. And I would have just preferred Aaron Sorkin to be like, yeah, I think really I just hadn't done enough research into it. I hadn't taken stock of thinking about representation when it came to casting. Do you know what? We then took lengths to like address that within the show rather than going, I just hired the right people, yada yada yada. Like, don't just say that you got it wrong. It's fine. It will make people like you more.
Yeah.
Admit that you have something to learn.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we go back to President Bartlett? Should we
having
go
a
back
meltdown and a tantrum?
Having an absolute tantrum. So we head back into the Situation Room and the Joint Chiefs, and Chairman Fitzwallace absolutely nailing it. So President Bartlett in no way has got over his kind of like grumpiness. Mm-hmm. And Chairman Fitzwallace basically provides him with this like improportional response. That's correct grammar. Which is going to be a huge amount of civilian casualties. And then Bartlett looks very sheepish. And kind of Fitzwallace, in a really supportive way, provides a teaching moment. Yeah. Which I kind of feel is like a really important situation to portray, because I think often presidents in films and TVs are these sort of like infallible characters who kind of always have the answer. Yeah. And so I do love seeing Jed being able to learn something and be like, okay, right, cheers for that. Like, I'm going to take that away and digest that because I didn't know that previously.
Because I'm not Aslan, and therefore I can't be immediately an expert in no one man as president, no one person, I should say, can be as president informed on every single issue under the sun. So they do need to. And I think that's something that like Obama was really famous for, was being like, let me get the experts in the room and learn from them.
However, in response to this supportive moment from Fitzwallace, Bartlett just says to the room, does anyone have a cigarette?
You know what? He is kind of like, the character of Bartlett is kind of like a drag performer, snatch gaming president of the United States.
Yes. Oh, I really love that reading from you. Fantastic. I think the moment with like asking for a cigarette from someone is really giving kind of like drunk gal pal outside of a pub. She's had a sort of a fight or a falling out with the person she's seeing, doesn't normally smoke, but it's like, oh my God, I just really need a cigarette.
Yeah. And it's like that moment where you turn to the random girl you've just met in the bathrooms and you're like, I need to break up with him, don't I?
Yeah. So that's the energy that Bartlett's giving me. But we do get a kind of the power of being able to press like the red button, which we did talk about in the previous episode. And I do like that we kind of get this moment of hubris from Bartlett, because he's quite worthy and he talks about like God and the Romans a lot. And I worried that he was...
He loves the Romans.
He just loves the Romans. I was worrying that he was getting a little bit squeaky clean.
Yeah.
In my notes here, I've just put plot twist. What if Morris is alive and makes a hero's return?
I think the thing is, you do kind of need your president or your politician in order to be likable, to feel like they're good crack. Like you want them to be like, have good judgment, but at the same time, you don't want someone who's shit crack running the country.
Yeah, he has to be 3D. He can't just be like cardboard cutout of like good president guy. Yeah. Especially on like what you're planning to be like a really long running series. If you look at like I can't remember the name of the actor, but the guy who plays the president of the United States in like Independence Day.
Oh my God, what a man.
What a performance. But he is very squeaky clean and like...
We will not fade into the night.
You can get away with that in like a 2-hour-long film. Yeah. But in like a 21 episode a season TV show, I think that would get old very quickly. Yeah. However, at the end of this scene, Fitzwallace sums it up by saying you can't dispense like a $50,000 punishment for a $50 crime, which I think is like a very like useful analogy in, you know, very like kind of basic analogy for what they're talking about with proportional response. And then as he's leaving the room, Bartlett's like, $50 crime? Honestly, I don't know what the hell we're doing here. And I so badly wanted to like reach into the TV and shake him and be like, no one was saying that Morris and the other people on that plane were worth $50. Like no one has said that. Just calm down, have one of Mrs. Landingham's cookies from her desk, have a cup of tea, and just chill out.
Yeah, there is a kind of paternalistic edge as well in terms of like America as parent to the rest of the world. Because earlier he says like, I want a response that doesn't just feel like we're docking their pocket money. And it's like, okay, like the rest of the world are not America's children. Like, please.
We're often a hot mess. But like, you know, like you're not my dad.
Yeah.
No one made you my dad. Like, stop deciding how I'm going to respond to this. Should we flash back to Charlie's interview, which just continues to get worse and worse for him?
Yeah.
So Josh is continuing to ask him questions. We're interrupted by Sam. Josh is starting to ask Charlie some personal questions, which I think when you're applying for a job that's like very close to the president seem fair. And then Sam is still on his sort of high horse around like, no one should know anything about anyone's personal life. That's really not fair. So then he and Josh just start having like an argument. Meanwhile, poor Charlie sat there in his with his like little notebook, just being like, I don't understand. Is the messenger job still available?
And the president, your boss, Sam, is like considering ordering an airstrike. I think your girl problems can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah. And also just like stop dragging other people into this. You don't know Charlie.
Yeah. It's extremely disrespectful to Charlie interrupting his job interview.
I will flag though that that it does seem to be that there's a question that Josh asks in a very roundabout way, but I would rather he just asked very clearly, which is that he
asks about his lifestyle.
Yeah, which is a phrase I really hate.
It's a phrase I despise.
But what he's asking is whether or not Charlie's gay. And from like a CJ as press secretary point of view, well, you know, it's 1998.
So we're not even 10 years out from
the height of the AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
So it does feel like if an out gay man were to be the president's personal aide, that is something that the press would be wanting to discuss.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's an important thing, which I think it is, just ask the question clearly, Josh.
Yeah.
I don't believe Josh has any gay friends.
I don't know that Josh has any gay friends. I don't know that Sam has any gay friends. I don't know that Leo has any gay friends. I think CJ probably does.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, we've not even, hilariously, for two queer women watching this, we've not even discussed the fact that there are no queer characters in this series.
No, and that kind of like, because we were laughing about the kind of, the season 1 of The West Wing started airing just after season 1 of Sex and the City finished. Yeah. And I was like, wow, living in the world where those two series were kind of like happening at the same time is crazy, because you have clear awareness for gay culture in Sex and the City, and obviously like amazing characters like Stanford.
But I think Stanford was a really revolutionary character. I mean, obviously people look back now and retrospectively criticize the fact that obviously he was played by a wonderful straight actor, but a straight actor. And, you know, he is very much the kind of quintessential gay best friend. He doesn't necessarily get his own kind of really meaty story arcs or anything like that.
No, not for many, many series.
But also I think it is really important to note that Stanford was one of the first like reoccurring important gay characters to be on television. So like, I think The West Wing isn't quite benefiting yet from the legacy of characters like Stanford on Sex and the City.
No, we've got a way to go. And I think obviously like it does feel like even now in 2024, there are really only a handful of out queer folks working in American politics.
And British politics for that matter. And I mean, obviously we have Leah Varadkar in Ireland. say what you like about his policies, but we absolutely loved him bringing his boyfriend, boyfriend, to go and meet Mike Pence. Obsessed. Obsessed.
Mike Pence just shitting his pants because
Mike Pence's wife refused to come. He brought his sister, I think.
Ugh. What a bitch. I don't know if that's relevant to say, but just what a bitch. But yeah, I think what Aaron Sorkin was trying to do is just like show what like the public zeitgeist was around queerness at the time. Which he does do successfully because Josh does skirt around the point. But I think actually Josh as a character would probably have been more direct about that.
Yeah, I feel like he's reading from a set list of questions that like everyone who's going to be working on the president's personal staff has to answer. And I think it's probably phrased like that in the kind of interview booklet or whatever.
Ugh, grim. I hope it's different now. It probably isn't.
Well, I mean, like, I think President Biden does actually have more representation of queer people in his staff and in his cabinet. Because like we said, the current press secretary is an out queer woman.
I think if the show was being made now about politics now, there would certainly be at least 2 characters that were queer in some respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, CJ, for me, is just like very queer-coded anyway.
100%.
Just the like legs up on the desk reading the newspaper, for me.
Yeah.
Like we said, it's power dyke energy.
Yeah. I should clarify that when I say power dyke, I am a dyke, so I'm allowed to say power dyke.
Yeah, and also we know that you love them, so...
I mean, yeah, 100% my type on paper.
Yeah. Take me for dinner. I'll wear a pretty little dress.
Yeah.
Sorry, just reading you for filth there, Leigh.
That's okay.
I think that Leo comes into his own in this episode. We have some fantastic scenes with him, but there is like one particular scene which is when the team get the news that like you can come to the sit room in 20 minutes for a weapons briefing. That Leo just like completely runs his team perfectly. And you kind of flagged a moment with CJ that he has.
Yeah, because CJ is very much being like, I need a moment with the president. Like, and she's very much like advocating for herself, being like, to use a Hamilton reference, I need to be in the room where it happens. And Leo is like...
Thank you, now I understand.
Yeah. In brief, the Situation Room is the room where it happens. And Leo was like, you'll be there, CJ, don't worry. And I just love that he sees his one female senior member of staff being like, I need to be there, I can't be left out of this. And him immediately clocking that that's what her concern is and saying, it doesn't need to be a concern, you'll be there.
Which I think is just like what any good boss should do.
Yeah.
Like reads the room, is like, that's what this member of staff needs. That's what this member of staff needs. I'm going to give it to them.
Yeah.
Good. Now I can get on with my day.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens in this scene, which I found really interesting, was there's a kind of conversation about optics between Josh and Leo regarding the hiring of Charlie as the president's personal aide. And I actually really rated this because, you know, Josh was like, I care about how it looks. This person is going to be like, kind of in a way part of the team of assistants that work for the president, right?
Yeah, because he's the personal assistant, basically. So like he's not necessarily doing all of that like admin work that an executive assistant would be doing. As a former PA myself, you are just kind of, you know, you just basically are running whatever errands the person needs you to do. So
yeah.
And that's why he's concerned, because it will involve things like opening doors and carrying bags and things like that.
And I respect that Josh is like, is it appropriate for us to have a young black man doing that role?
Yeah.
You know, or is it offensive towards Charlie to be hiring him for that?
Yeah.
And I think that Leo responds really well, has like a solid check-in moment and is like, I don't see that being a problem. Like, let's move forward. Josh leaves. Enter Chairman Fitzwallace.
Such daddy energy.
I love him and I was going to call it his costume, but what I mean is his uniform.
Also, just to say fair play to this actor, like I just believe every inch of him as like an admiral. I'm just like, he carries like the power and the gravitas of who that character is with like, I just completely 100% believe it. I just think he's amazing.
That he's been to war. I believe that he's been to war.
I mean, I don't know if he like is going to be a recurring character, but I just think to come in for like one episode and be just
a scene stealer, Leigh. He's stealing scenes.
A scene stealer.
Yeah, but he has a great moment with Leo where Leo kind of has the same conversation that Josh has just had with him, with Chairman Fitzwallace, which I'm like, yes, Leo, you're saying that this isn't your own personal experience. You're going to ask another person of colour what their experience was.
And what their instinct is on it.
Yeah, and he's just a supportive king, just very calmly says to Leo, I got some real honest-to-God battles to fight, Leo. I don't have time for the cosmetic ones.
Yeah.
Just like him being like, are you going to pay him fairly? Are you going to treat him respectfully? Great. Give the boy an opportunity.
Yeah.
Chairman Fitzwallace for Prez.
Yeah.
I would vote for him.
Yeah.
As the Democratic candidate following Bartlett.
Yeah.
He also says that presidents don't make new friends. That's why they hang on to their old ones.
Yeah, because Leo's basically being like, oh God, I've got to calm the president down because he's ordering an airstrike and he has to be like he can't just be a salty bitch while he's doing that.
He is being such a salty bitch.
And basically Chairman Fitzwallace is, and also I think it's a big moment for the Bartlett presidency because it's the first time that they're ordering any kind of attack. And so I think Chairman Fitzwallace is just like, well, you know, you guys have got this. You guys are good. You got your bro. You're fine.
Yeah, you know, you guys go way back. Just talk. Just have a little guy chat, which incidentally is what they do later on.
Yeah.
Shock horror. Sam has a moment of clarity and decides to apologize to someone.
Thank God.
It is a piss poor apology.
Yeah.
But he does like track down CJ and says, I want to apologize for earlier. He doesn't make it quite clear what he's apologizing for, but he's trying.
Yeah.
And the solid gold response from CJ is just to look at him and say, go back to work.
Not giving him an inch. Forgiven but not forgotten.
Precisely.
In the words of the chicks.
I do feel like CJ
She is not ready to make nice. She is not ready to back down.
Not at all.
She's still mad as hell. I'm just going to stop quoting the chicks now.
CJ does strike me as a character that like doesn't forget when she has been wronged.
Yeah. It's logged.
It's logged. And so I'm looking forward to like this coming back around. CJ then does get pressed by like one of the White House journalists because of course they know about Laurie and Sam and they're like, what the hell's going on? But the little tidbit of info that we do get is that Laurie is a $3,000 a night escort.
Yeah, which I looked up in modern money is like nearly 6K.
So, do you know what? Fair play, Laurie.
Fair play.
Like, that's incredible. And why shouldn't she go for dinner with like older men who want to be with a pretty woman?
Yeah.
Stop shaming her.
Yeah.
But yeah, we kind of have like a little sort of like mic drop moment in a way where CJ is like, I'm going to have to actually deal with this. And that's why I needed to be looped in from the start.
Yeah.
Enter Mandy.
In a powder blue skirt suit.
Which is gorgeous and the world's worst perm.
The world's worst perm. I cannot respect the perm, unfortunately.
I respect so that bad.
Like growing out a pixie cut is tough. But like a perm is not the answer.
I'm currently growing out a short haircut and it's awful, but you are correct. A perm it's not the answer. It looks awful. It's so round.
And she's a very beautiful woman. So yeah.
Very beautiful. Classic Mandy is just not reading the room at all. So it's like, some might say it's a high stakes day.
Some might say, yes.
And Josh just says, why are you here? Which I feel to be a very valid question. And then Mandy's response, which is truly psychotic, is I came to get psyched.
She needs to stop saying psyched. She says psyched. I think basically they've decided that psyched is just like a super Mandyism. She says psyched about 4 times in the space of 5 minutes, and I need her to stop saying psyched. She's a serious woman with a serious job.
100%. And like, yes, she should be excited. You know, it's Friday and she starts her new job on Monday. Like, of course. Now
ditched Daisy to the curb though, hasn't she?
Yeah, no Daisy.
No word from Daisy. Has Daisy gotten a new job opportunity?
Bloody hope so. What she does do is arrive with a present for Josh, and said present, I can't even say it so bad. The present is a framed photograph of the two of them, but with him Like
From the
scratched
day that they met, considering they are exes,
with his face like scribbled out with Sharpie.
Imagine for a moment, Fiona, if you will, my most recent ex, who does in fact work in the same industry as me. Imagine I discover that we're going to be working together, and I show up the day before our first day of working together with a photograph of the two of us and her face scribbled out. You would have me sectioned. That is unhinged.
Yeah, I would call the police.
You would be like, lock Lee Douglas down.
Yeah.
You would like form an armed guard outside my house with like a rotating shift system with our other friends to be like, Lee is not in her right mind and she cannot speak to anyone.
No. Josh takes this very well.
He takes it so well, to be fair to him.
He also full names her because he loves to full name people. Madeline. Oh, Madeline. I don't know how Madeline has become Mandy and not Maddie.
Also, like, why would you not be Madeline professionally?
Yeah.
If you have a very serious job in politics and your name is Madeline, why on earth are you going by Mandy professionally? That's crazy.
It's just another reason for me not to trust Mandy. Yeah, I just can't with her. I'm Leigh. I'm not psyched.
No,
about Mandy.
And I, for one, am thrilled that she didn't get behind the wheel this episode.
The streets of DC are safe for now. Let's go back to CJ and the journalist, who, although I don't think we ever hear his name, like, again, is another, like, slightly balding, dad-bodied man who just weirdly is sexy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, why is there chemistry?
There is chemistry, right? And I think I'm just gonna put a pin in that because I am so ready for them to give CJ an incredibly ugly boyfriend.
I know.
Rather than the insanely hot girlfriend that she deserves.
I see pratfalls on the horizon.
Oh no. She deserves so much more.
She deserves so much better.
Oh. But she does defend Sam to the hilt.
Yeah.
Frankly, Sam doesn't deserve her or her respect or her support.
No.
But yeah, she covers his ass and basically spins the kind of moral high ground that he was using to beat her with to her advantage, causing said male journalist to just say, "Down, girl."
Why do I find it quite fun?
Me too. I think I might start using it.
Yeah, I'm less enamored with the phrase, "You'd better get D'd up here." Does that mean dicked up? Is that what he's saying?
I think you've made a real jump to go to penis there, Leigh.
What else would it be?
You better get D'd up. I wonder if it's like, I mean, the only thing I could think of was like details, like basically like you better get like up to date with your own story.
I feel like it's dick.
As a woman who's confidently said that she is horrified by penises, you've jumped to dick quite quickly here.
I just feel like if I were a kind of like cigar smoking, male balding journalist in the 90s covering politics, that's what I would mean.
You would reference dicks.
Yeah. As like,
it's just like kind of like a fun, like kind of everyday.
Get your strength up.
Let's get fucking dicked up.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate it. If that's true, I really hate it.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the national address from the president. It's time for the national address. Bartlett is very stressed. It's very triggering. He's still not found his glasses.
And he's so upset about it.
He literally is shouting at everyone. Josh tries to introduce Charlie, and Bartlett just says, "I don't have time for new people right now." At which point, Leo very rightly like has an intervention and just takes Bartlett aside for like a "you're right, hun" moment. During which point he says, "You're sending tomorrow. You're going to send Abby some flowers." So there is reference to Bartlett.
Flotus.
Yeah, I think Abby is Flotus. Because it did say earlier, though, in the episode, someone did say that he was shouting at his wife. Yeah. So my detective skills is saying Abby is FLOTUS. Excited, maybe we'll meet her in the next ep. Bartlett then decides to do quite a long speech about the Romans.
Just purely for Leo's benefit. No one else is in the room.
No one else is there. Like, now isn't the time. The airstrike on the Syrian intelligence base has taken place. We're waiting to hear back how it went. You're imminently going to address the American people. Now is not the time to start talking about, like, how Roman men could walk the surface of the earth with no problems.
Yeah. This is why I don't date men.
Understood. It's also why I believe that Leo deserves a raise. Anyway, Charlie comes in and saves the day because he's very quickly works out where the president's glasses are.
Yeah.
Causing the president to immediately befriend Charlie and like have a little kind of like heart-to-heart moment, which I think cements Charlie as a key character. And then the music starts swelling, the rain is falling on the windows of the White House, and we start the address to the American people. And Charlie's just like by the monitor with Josh and just says really sweetly, "I've never felt like this before."
And that's when I cried. It's happened. I've cried for the first time watching The West Wing.
Episode 3.
Yeah. Charlie is locked in. He's excited. He's involved.
He's psyched.
He is famously psyched.
Okay, quick fire, end of episode thoughts. Best fashion.
Can I just give it to CJ's legs on the desk?
That was 100% my answer too.
Amazing.
Okay, stunning.
Although Sheila, who I thought was just an unnamed EA, but Sheila, who shouted briefly at Toby, I just want to give honourable mention to her powder blue skirt suit because it was stunning.
Heard. What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
I'm going to say going by Jed.
Going by Jed or Mandy.
Yeah.
Also, just like to get a little bit more deep, just fighting for a relationship with a call girl.
Yeah.
I just think we just wouldn't let that fly.
No.
So in our kind of like bingo card of how long until big issues come up, I kind of threw that to one side today because we did talk about the kind of connection with season 1 of Sex and the City. And so I just thought perhaps instead we could decide whether or not the key characters in Sex and the City would have voted for Bartlett.
Yes. And also whether they were Democrats or Republicans. Because we never knew.
We never knew. We should start off easy with Mr. Big.
100% Mr. Big is a Republican.
Oh yeah,
he did not vote for Bartlett.
No, I think he would have described Bartlett as soft.
Yeah.
Miranda Hobbs.
Miranda Hobbs voted for Bartlett.
Yeah, she's a really vocal Democrat.
And you know that she's watching CJ's press briefing every morning before work.
Yeah, and she definitely had like a vote for Bartlett sign in the window of her apartment.
Yeah.
Carrie Bradshaw.
Carrie Bradshaw, I don't believe knew who Bartlett was. And then Miranda like had an intervention with her being like, it's really important to vote, Carrie. Like, please vote.
The thing is, there's quite a lot of like strange like references to like Carrie's quite humble upbringings. It's sort of like on a farm or something, or like some sort of like black and white photo of like her and an old man. But I don't know, there's something in Carrie Bradshaw that there's just a whiff of closet Republican.
I think she became more and more conservative the longer she was married to Big.
Okay, yeah, no, I can get on board with that. Samantha Jones.
Samantha Jones is like, Bartlett is daddy. I'm voting Bartlett all the way.
Also, I would love us to like create some fan fiction, which is just like Toby Ziegler's trip to New York, where he meets Samantha Jones in a bar, and they just like absolutely fuck the living shit out of each other in a hotel room.
Love that for Toby. Love that for Toby.
Because I just think he'd be the sort of man that Samantha would be like, not my usual type, but yeah, okay then.
The witty repartee I will take.
Yes, 100%. He would laugh her into bed. Charlotte, don't quite know how to move on from that. Charlotte York.
See, this is difficult because my old Hinge profile did used to read the gay Charlotte York. However, I have a horrible, horrible feeling that Charlotte is a Republican.
I think Charlotte's a Republican. She wouldn't have voted for Bartlett, but then when she got together with Harry Goldenblatt, I think that he made her a Democrat.
I agree. I think she was Republican through the first marriage. And then Harry was like, me and Jed Bartlett went to law school together. He's a good guy.
Yeah, 100%. Or like Harry like worked as like an intern on a campaign for something.
I feel like Harry and Toby would be pals.
Maybe
Like-
they went to like this-
college bros.
college bros. I see that. Like law school bros, I think. I suppose that concludes probably one of the like most frivolous sections of this podcast that we may ever make.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like a man.
I just would really love to say at some point in my life, you don't have to call me sir. Because ma'am always feels like I'm old. Like you're basically calling me geriatric by calling me ma'am. Whereas sir doesn't have the same connotation of being like baron. You know, it just has the power.
Yeah, ma'am feels very librarian-esque, doesn't it?
It does. I would just love to be able to turn around to a young man one day and be like, you don't have to call me sir.
Also, no shade to librarians, literally my dream job. I think mine was Toby Ziegler says there's a new sheriff in town.
Oh my God, I loved that.
It's so lame. It's so lame that I love it.
We did entirely shift over Toby Ziegler just like being like the pitbull puppy of the staff, just like getting really annoyed that another politician has another Democrat has insulted Bartlett.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we kind of glossed over the shade that was being thrown, but I think that will come back round in the next episode. Which moment made you proudest to be American, Leigh?
I think just President Bartlett saying to his best friend and chief of staff, Leo, I could pummel your ass with a baseball bat. There's never been a more kind of American sentiment for me.
It's a really confusing like sentence to unpack because that's the gayest thing I've ever heard.
It's so homoerotic.
But
And that's why it makes me proud to be an American.
I kind of just like want them to kiss sometimes.
I know, yeah.
Like I kind of want them to argue and then like one of them to kiss the other one on the cheek and be like, I'm sorry, honey, I'm just having a bad day.
Yeah.
And not to reduce everything entirely to people being sexually attracted to each other. But hey, that's how I get through life. Mine was Leo saying, and then we'll blow him up again in 6 months. We're getting really good at it. Yeah, which just feels very American to me in kind of a grim way. Anyhow, I've waffled on quite significantly about this episode, Leigh. Would you like to teach me some things?
Yes. So obviously, as Leo famously says, I'll see you in the sit room in 20. The situation room, obviously, famously, as we've established, is the room where it happens. It was created in 1961 by JFK because the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba was attributed to basically like a lack of current information coming through. So they created the Situation Room, and it's basically a secure set of rooms. There's one large room and there's conference rooms off of it that has a staff of about 130 people.
Whoa.
To ensure basically that the president and his national security advisor are informed of like the current world situation at all times. So they basically work in shifts. They're staffed by the various intelligence agencies, and they work in shifts to monitor domestic and international events. They put together a morning book for the president with like diplomatic cables, intelligence reports, everything that's kind of currently happening in the world. And it is in the car of the national security advisor every morning when they're picked up for work.
Okay. See, I always thought that the Situation Room was something that was just like only came into play when like something was going on. I didn't realize that it's like consistently staffed all the time.
Yeah. And it's staffed
cool.
also by like video operators and like communications technicians and all this kind of thing. And there is a really famous photograph of the Situation Room during Operation Neptune Spear, which was the mission when Osama bin Laden was killed. And I thought I'd bring this up with reference specifically to what we were talking about, CJ being a woman in the West Wing, in that a lot was made of that photograph historically in a couple of different ways, because you basically see they're not in the main situation room, they're in a conference room off of the main situation room so that they could actually watch the mission unfold. And you have a military commander kind of at the head of the table, kind of running things. And then basically President Obama said, I need to actually watch this live feed. So Obama's in the room, but a lot has been made about the fact that President Obama is not in the center of the room. He's not on the highest chair. And a lot has been made that says a lot about his presidency, in that he was really collaborative in his approach, which we also mentioned last week, in that he very much delegated things to Joe Biden as his vice president. So it is very much saying like there was a real like egalitarian energy to Barack Obama's presidency. But a lot was also made about the fact that Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State at the time, is also in this photograph. And she's covering her mouth with her hand. And basically, the press kind of had a bit of a field day with this, because they were saying that as a woman, she was being more demonstrative with her emotions, and therefore kind of couldn't handle the heat, basically, of being in the situation room. And they're saying that she's the only one in the room who's kind of having an emotional response to what's happening. And that also she was potentially showing compassion towards Osama bin Laden. Hillary Clinton then came out and said that she had allergies and she was suppressing a cough.
People are allowed to put their hands over their mouths.
Yeah.
And it not mean that they're crying.
Also, I think for my money, if basically a hit is being taken out on a human being, I think it's important that there are people in the room where those decisions are being made who is connected to the humanity of that. I don't think we should divorce ourselves from the kind of emotionality of that as a situation.
No, we should, something that President Bartlett is obviously not afraid to show his emotions, as we've seen in this episode, famously, being a salty bitch. But I think it is kind of being brought into the forefront of a lot of the drama in this show so far, is like being constantly reminded of morality.
Yeah.
Alongside the kind of glamour and drama of politics.
And yeah, so a lot was made about the fact that obviously there's White House photographers, so all of these things are kind of photographed for the historical record. And there's a lot of famous photographs that are taken in the Situation Room during various briefings and different things. And a lot was made about the fact that there are, in fact, 2 women in this photograph. And that was kind of saying that obviously there was a huge amount of progress that had been made by the fact that there were 2 women who were in that really important decision-making room. But at the same time, the response to Hillary Clinton potentially showing her emotions kind of shows that there was still a long way to go, in my personal view.
Yeah.
So obviously also the main thing that we're discussing today is the Joint Chiefs, who we met today, who were giving President Bartlett his kind of options in terms of how he could respond to the plane being shot down in the last episode. And so the Joint Chiefs are the chiefs of the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and the National Guard. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is selected by the president, and they can be from any from any of those military branches. I think historically they did kind of rotate it around the branches, but certain presidents have kind of messed with that and chosen the person that they liked most. They serve 1 4-year term, and they can only stay on longer than 4 years as chairman of the Joint Chiefs in case of the country being at war or a national emergency.
Okay.
And they are the most senior military officer in the United States Armed Forces for those 4 years. And basically, they don't have any command authority, so they don't get to make decisions. That's a really important distinction that got made along the way. But they're the lead military advisor to the president, basically, which we saw today with Fitzwallace kind of laying out those different options for President Bartlett. And the way that this kind of, I suppose, comes in is that General Mark Milley had the unfortunate circumstance of being the chairman of the Joint Chiefs under Donald Trump. And this led him to a couple of awkward moments. The first time they kind of came to drama, as it were. I don't want to say come to blows with regards military issues, but the first time that they came to drama was basically Trump called Mark Milley over to a walk that he was doing through a square which had just been cleared of George Floyd protesters with the use of tear gas. And because he was called away from what he was doing at short notice, Mark Milley was wearing his combat fatigues. And he left as soon as he realized the political implications of him being in his combat fatigues in this square that had just been cleared of Black Lives Matter protesters. And he said that when he realized what was happening, he felt sick and was, quote, fucking done with this shit.
Oh my God. I mean, fair, very fair.
He considered resigning after that, but didn't. He made a formal apology. This kind of started basically, Trump was always trying to get photos with Mark Milley. He tried to use them in campaign ads as well, which obviously the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is meant to be an apolitical figure. So that was completely unacceptable. So this was the beginning of Trump having an issue with Milley, basically. And when Trump lost the 2020 election, Milley started to get worried that he was going to try and stage a coup. And it was reported that he said to his deputies, they may try, but they're not going to fucking succeed. You can't do this without the military. You can't do this without the CIA and the FBI. We're the guys with the guns. Allegedly, this is what he said.
Allegedly, that sounds like it's from a movie.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that I love the content of it, but I love the energy that it's giving.
So imagine, if you will, basically President Bartlett loses his re-election bid. Fitzwallace is there being like, I think Bartlett is going to try and stage a coup. And Bartlett is going to all of the other men in that Joint Chiefs meeting being like, we're not going to let this happen, guys, not on our watch. That's essentially what was going on.
Oh my God.
In the preparation for Joe Biden's presidential inauguration, again, allegedly, Mark Milley is reported as saying, everyone in this room, whether you're a cop, whether you're a soldier, we're going to stop these guys to make sure we have a peaceful transfer of power. We're going to put a steel ring around this city and the Nazis aren't getting in.
Oh.
Crazy.
It's mad, isn't it? Because it really wasn't that long ago, like a matter of a few years. It feels like a lifetime ago that all of that was going down. And I think because it kind of coincided with such a intense moment of like shared experience with the COVID-19 pandemic, I feel like we kind of forgot what a huge moment it was that there was this like huge insurrection so close to the inauguration.
Yeah. I mean, like, I remember because we were sat in our old flat, weren't we, watching some documentary, and you literally got a text from our friend being like, put the news on. I mean, how often in your life does that happen, that you get a text being like, put the news on? And we just sat and watched the live stream, didn't we?
We watched it for hours and it just kept getting worse.
So, and then the Joint Chiefs, who are that group that we saw Bartlett meeting with, they put out a statement post January 6th saying, as we have done throughout history, the US military will obey lawful orders from civilian leadership, support civilian authorities to protect lives and property, ensure public safety in accordance with the law, and remain fully committed to protecting and defending the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So that was the statement that that group that we saw in this episode put out post Jan 6th. In response, Trump called Milley a dumbass. In 2023, he called the 4-star Army General Milley an idiot. And then quite recently, in September 2023, because basically it came out that Milley contacted the Chinese government in the wake of January 6th, in addition to many other governments, on the orders of the Defense Department, basically to reassure foreign governments that the United States was stable and there would be a peaceful transfer of power, basically. Obviously, that is hugely his job. But it came out that he'd specifically had this conversation with his Chinese equivalent, Milley's Chinese equivalent. And Trump wrote on Truth Social with reference to that conversation. This guy turned out to be a woke train wreck who, if the fake news reporting is correct, was actually dealing with China to give them a heads up on the thinking of the President of the United States. This is an act so egregious, in times gone by, the punishment would have been, all capitals, death. A war between China and the United States could have been a result of this treasonous act, to be continued, 4 exclamation marks. So obviously, Milley is no longer chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He continued to serve under President Biden. He was invited to continue serving when Biden took over. He then finished his term, and there is a new chairman of the Joint Chiefs now. So Milley is set to retire. He's not really hugely relevant to public life anymore. But I do think it's interesting that even in September 2023, Trump is continuing to make a political issue out of the previous chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Yeah.
When famously, as we kind of saw here, the Joint Chiefs are an apolitical organization. They're not part of the West Wing team that is selected by Bartlett. Obviously, the chairman is selected from the group by the president, but it's not based off of political affiliation.
And I think it's quite clear that they're not calling the shots either. Like, they provide the information in order for the president to make decisions. Yeah. Now, if the president is Donald Trump and therefore a moron, you can understand why he got so confused.
So I think that this episode was a really interesting window into the Joint Chiefs and how that all works. But also, I think it's a really interesting reflection on the fact that ultimately the president does have the final say as the commander-in-chief. But also, I suppose, in terms of the checks and balances that we talked about in the first episode, even within the executive branch, because the military is part of the executive branch, even within the executive branch, we are seeing with this situation with Donald Trump and Chairman Mark Milley, the military, through the Joint Chiefs, was able to actually check Donald Trump's power.
Because obviously the idea of having a commander-in-chief feels like that's such a powerful responsibility. But I suppose what you've been talking about with Milley is that they are able to kind of like navigate and provide as much information as possible to help the president come to what should be the most informed and valid decision.
Yeah, so I think this episode has been really interesting and instructive in terms of like the fact that Hillary Clinton didn't get elected, Trump did, which I think is also, I think, say what you like about Hillary Clinton, she's a very polarizing political figure, but I think through CJ's character, we are getting a real window into some of the obstacles that were in her way that would have not been in her way if she'd been a male politician or a male person in political life. And I think it's also a really interesting window into like the checks and balances that prevented Jan 6th from being a coup.
Yeah, I feel like we've really dug into some like really big and meaty topics. Like, I think I didn't realize the level of which there are so many different branches that the president is kind of the head of.
Yeah.
And actually, in order to do that job, you just need to be so informed.
Yeah, which is why it's an issue that President Trump obviously like didn't read a lot of the materials that he was being given. He famously I think he ate some of his papers at one point.
Yeah, it's just chaotic. And I can't imagine what it was like to have been in the White House working at that time, spending a huge amount of time preparing things that someone is not going to take any time to read.
Yeah, especially these people in these kind of apolitical posts. So not the people who specifically chose to work as part of Trump's staff, but are a member of the West Wing or the executive branch who's kind of career professional in a specialized area. And then Trump comes into the presidency and suddenly you have to do everything completely differently because you're not dealing with
a rational human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shall we finish on a slightly lighter note by throwing out some predictions for next week's episode?
I believe we're meeting FLOTUS in the next episode, Stockard Channing, which I'm incredibly excited about.
I'm really excited to meet FLOTUS. I also think that this will be the full entrance of Mandy into the West Wing.
Yes.
I think that there's going to be a continuation of like Laurie and Sam and the whole Sam being on his moral high horse and Laurie being like, I don't need you to save me.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll see Charlie stepping into his new role.
Yes, his first day on the job.
And perhaps some repercussions for the Syria airstrike and the kind of bubbling B plot in this episode, which was other Democratic politicians being like shady towards Bartlett.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I feel like I didn't think we would like go like into the deep end so quickly on this show. I thought they'd sort of like lull us in for a few episodes, but we're straight on in.
Yeah.
A reminder to any of you guys that might be listening, if you have your own stupid questions or anything that you're like, I would love Leigh to explain this to me in her lovely lilting Irish tones, then do send us your stupid questions, because they're not stupid. They're very valid.
You can get us on, if you want to send them in DMs, we are at Queer Gals Watch the West Wing on Instagram, and we are queergalswatchthewestwing@gmail.com.
If you wish to send us electronic mail.
Yeah, we would love to hear your stupid questions. I think in terms of what we might focus on next ep, as confusing as it is to us outside of the United States, in a country where guns are not legal, I think it might be interesting to jump into what is the Second Amendment? What even is the Second Amendment, and why is it still so important in the minds of so many Americans today and continues to be such a hot button issue? Obviously super aware that like gun crime is a horrible topic. We are not going to get into anything triggering as regarding gun crime or anything like that. We're literally just going to get into the history of the right to own a gun. But don't worry, we won't be talking about anything horrible in terms of mass shootings.
Just Leigh bringing both comedy and intense political commentary here. So proud of you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll see you next week then, Leigh.
Yes. Please do send us in all your stupid questions and we can maybe deep dive into them in another ep.
I'm psyched, Leigh. Are you psyched?
I'm so psyched.